Thank you. Welcome in to the Chris Duel Show on a Friday, April 23rd of 2021. Yes, this is Shannon Salty Sweeney because unfortunately, fortunately, Chris did receive his second COVID shot yesterday. Unfortunately, he is under the weather because of it. He texted me right before bed last night saying it's not looking great. So I'm hoping he is feeling better this morning. But joining me is Mr. Andy Everett and Sam Freeze, who I think he's feeling a little bit better. We spoke to him yesterday after his second shot, and he was under the weather, but I think he's coming out of it now. But Mr. Andy Everett joins me. Mr. Andy, where are you located this morning? I see it looks like you're in an office of sorts.
I am in my home office, indeed.
Oh,
yes, and if I could figure out a way, and I'm not very technically savvy on some things, other things I am, but if I could figure out a way to put a background behind the StreamYard video that we're on, then I would do that. But it's not cooperating, so you're just going to have to deal with what you have today.
I was going to say, I think there's a way, but I don't know. My goal in life is to be financially stable enough to own a place with an office. Just so I can say I'm in the office, I'm in the study.
There you are.
Whatever it may be. But there's lots to get into this morning. Of course, a big sports weekend. Last weekend felt a little dry after the Masters, but a huge weekend for Texas sports. So I'll go ahead and get us into our poll question today. It's up on our Twitter pages, AM 1300 The Zone and Ticket 760, asking which Texas athletic sporting event are you most looking forward to this weekend? Of course, last night, Texas volleyball played in the Final Four against an undefeated Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin had a bit of a weird season, as everything has been weird with COVID, as they only played 18 games, but they were undefeated going into their game against Texas. But Texas got the sweep last night. They will now play Kentucky on Saturday for the championship game. But also on Saturday, we've got the orange and white game, a big game, big scrimmage, more like it, as it begins the new era for Steve and Sark and all gas, no breaks. Texas football, it's going to be exciting, especially after missing that game last year. And then Texas baseball, currently on a 14-game winning streak, goes up to Oklahoma to play number 24, Oklahoma State, in a baseball series. So they will look to extend that winning streak. Other things going on the 40 acres. You've got track, you've got tennis, you've got softball. So there's plenty of options. So go ahead and click other if maybe that interests you more. But right now we've got volleyball championship leading the way with 58% of the vote, followed by the orange and white game, 25% of the vote, and baseball, 16%. Andy, after last week, it felt like the longest weekend ever. The only thing I felt like we had going on for us was the Austin FC inaugural match, which was a big deal. And thank goodness there was that, because coming off the Masters, it felt like there was nothing going on in the sports world.
Yeah, April is typically the purgatory sports month after the beginning of it, because you've got the end of the Final Four, you've got the Masters. Typically, in a normal year, you don't have the NBA. The NBA is kind of winding down just a little bit, and you're trying to kind of get to a point to where the jockeying for a playoff position, which I guess teams are doing right now. But to me, the NBA is still missing something, and I think it's basically because the arenas are half empty, and you've got piped-in crowd noise for a lot of you have some crowd noise, but you don't have the full effect of it. I watched some of the Spurs-Detroit game last night, and there just isn't atmosphere at these games yet. And there won't be until we get the all clear to bring everybody back and everybody feels comfortable enough to come back. I think when you mention things going on this week in Austin, I think everybody's got to be somewhat intrigued by what Steve Sarkisian will bring to the Longhorns. UTSA will wrap up its spring practices next week. And everybody gets excited because now we're in that 18, 19-week time period between now and when football starts. And this, I think every year goes by quicker than the next year. We're already about to get into May, so the year's basically a third over already. And the back half, those last few months of the of the year are always football. So we're kind of in that if you're a baseball fan or if you have a baseball team in your city, then you can kind of jump on that bandwagon for the next few months until football gets here. But for a while, you're starting to figure out, okay, what's next? What's the fun thing to go do?
Yeah, it's not completely dry out there in the sports world. We're it's like we're lacking that marquee event. Of course, we do have the NFL draft taking place beginning next Thursday. So that is something to look forward to, but you mentioned that orange and white game. It's going to be huge. You mentioned the lack of atmosphere kind of going on in the NBA right now. It will be very interesting to see just how many people show up to the orange and white game. It is at 1 o'clock at DKR, free admission, free parking. Again, no one has seen what Sark and what he's got to bring. Of course, these games are typically very vanilla, right? They are a practice. You don't want to hurt anybody. You don't want to see anybody get hurt. But we do have a quarterback battle going on at the university right now between Hudson Carr and Casey Thompson. I think Casey Thompson is the guy that most people predict to see at that quarterback position. We've seen him get more playing time. We obviously saw him play pretty well in that Alamo Bowl victory. But there is a quarterback battle going on, so I'm sure that'll be the top story along with Sark and what he has to offer coming out of that spring game. Me personally, I would just like to see some consistency and some discipline, no unnecessary, uh, you know, flags going on either on the back end of the defense, which we seem to see a lot more recently. No false starts on either side. This is a practice. It's a controlled environment. It's not going to be as loud, but it's the closest thing you will get to a real life game atmosphere until the fall season. And I'd like to see all of our kicks do well, right? Buchevsky had a bit of a hard time last year with his punts. I mean, it was like, are we shanking it or are we kicking it down the field 50 yards? There is no in between. And then also Dicker, the kicker, just for him to continue to do his thing on top of seeing what the quarterbacks have to offer. I think one thing Sam lacked in most people's eyes was that deep ball, where I think Hudson Card and Casey Thompson shine a little bit more than him. So I'd love to see some great play action happen down the field. That game, of course, on LHN, 1 o'clock, and tonight on LHN. All access returns. And for those that don't know, it's kind of like the Hard Knocks version of the NFL, but for Texas. So it's a great behind the scenes. A lot of coaches, a lot of players are mic'd up. If you follow them on Twitter, you've seen some clips already. They do talk about that quarterback battle, so it should be interesting and a little appetizer going into tomorrow's game.
As a collective group, there is no more paranoid group of people than college football coaches. And they're the first to admit it. They'll tell you, yeah, we don't want anybody to know anything that we're doing because we don't know when we're going to pull this play out of the bag. Basketball coaches, for the most part, are generally a lot more laid back. Like, they know our plays, we know their plays. As soon as we put up a finger, they know what we're going to run. As soon as we give a hand signal, they know what we're going to run. And so it's whether or not you can out execute us or not. But coaches always have a trick up their sleeve, and they don't want anybody to know that they're doing it. So, yeah, you might see one or two trick plays just to kind of wow the audience, but then there'll be a different version of that play once they actually get to putting it into the game plan at whatever game they decide to do it. And then once the season begins, I think Texas opens with Louisiana Lafayette or Louisiana now. And so that'll be that's a really good team. That team was a top 20 team last year. So Texas has to be careful. It's not like playing, a smaller Division II team. So they don't want to show Louisiana anything because Louisiana is going to have people scouting that game on TV tomorrow. And most of these spring games have become basically a glorified practice. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the way things are headed in that direction there.
Well, I love how you bring up basketball because you're right. It is hard to disguise defense on basketball. Once you've sat yourself on a 2-3 zone, it's pretty easy to pin out versus the coverage that can change pretty quickly in football. And I agree with you. Louisiana is not a team that Texas should take lightly. Texas not known for scheduling cupcakes in their preseason kind of games before they get into that Big 12 run at the end of the year. And, I think of Maryland. I think we came into both of those games, both instances, one of them in which they had just had their head coach sidelined, where we thought that would be a pretty easy victory, start the season 1-0, like Tom Herman always said. And yet it just didn't happen for us. You think about that Sugar Bowl year, where would we have been? Could we have been in the playoff had we had not lost that first game? So it's not a game to overlook. There will obviously be excitement with Sark involved, but all gas, no brakes, as we know now is the saying. I think they need to keep that momentum driving through that first game. All right, I want to pause for a minute because, as you know, we like to give people money here on Ticket and the Zone, and each morning at 6:20 we do this. We'll do it again at 7:20, and I believe 12 times throughout the day on these airwaves. So be listening for the keyword. And here we go. That's right. Spring on either Ticket 760 or AM 1300, the Zone's website. You head over there. It's a little different. It used to be a text. Now you head to the website, just enter that word, and you are automatically entered to win $1,000. I would enter if I could, but they don't let me because I work here. As always, we are streaming live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook, so you can join Andy and I and join in the conversation on the comment section, as well as on your iHeartRadio app and your just regular AM airwaves. That's how I listen to the station when I drive in each morning. So happy to have Andy join us, as unfortunately Chris is not feeling so great after his second COVID shot. I will try and text him a little later this morning just to get an update. Hopefully he is sleeping. Anytime you take a day off, whether it's because you're sick or you're on vacation, I always hope that you are getting to sleep in at least a little bit for people like us who tend to get up at the wee hours of the morning. We've got a lot coming your way today. More conversation around the 40 acres. Of course, our high five play of the day, which is our newest segment on the Chris Duel Show, where we pinpoint a lovely and positive experience from around the country. Could be sports related, could be local, could be just somebody a listener who reaches out and says, hey, this really awesome thing happened in my life. We just want to spread some positivity because it can be hard to find some positive stories in the current climate. So we've got a great one for you today. Salty Shakedown at 7:30, as well as sports history and sports birthdays. And James Allen of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and of course, a Cowboys fan himself, will join us at 8 o'clock. Sam Freeze holding it down behind the board. And as I mentioned, Andy Everett, who also the golf connoisseur here for Ticket 760 and AM 1300, the Zone. I checked the PGA app yesterday. Nothing really too big happening this weekend, right, Andy?
Yeah, the Zurich Classic is in New Orleans, and they changed this format 2 or 3 years ago to a team competition, so players can kind of pick their partner and play in a team-oriented event. They used to do this on the PGA Tour back in the 50s and 60s. That kind of phased out in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and then they didn't do it until a few years ago. But April is a month where you really struggle to get top quality players to come play U.S. events. Now, it's a little easier now because most of the international players are still staying in the United States. It used to be that April was a month where they would leave and go back to Europe or Asia or Australia for a few weeks and then come back for the summer events. But this week and next week are kind of those purgatory events, if you will, on the PGA Tour right after the Masters, where a lot of the top players are taking weeks off. And until we get into May and now ramping up for the PGA Championship in about 3 or 4 weeks, and then the Memorial, which everybody wants to play in because it's Jack Nicklaus's hosted tournament, and that kind of gets you set up for the U.S. Open. There's a lot of players that just take this time of the year off, and the Valero Texas Open was in that area a few years ago until they renegotiated their contract for 10 years and got the date right before the Masters. So it's very much important to be right before a major than kind of in between the majors. And that's why the Zurich Classic, in order to attract attention and get more players that people want to see in its field, went to this format, and it's worked well for them. So that's what you'll see this week on the PGA Tour.
Well, we do have some Olympic news as it pertains to golf. We will get into that a little later today. I do want to get your answer on this before we head to break here. We talked about Hideki Matsuyama a little bit yesterday on the show and the impact he has had on Japan. Everything has sold out golf-wise. Anything that he wore, anything that he touched throughout the Masters has been purchased in Japan. There's an estimated $200 million that he will earn throughout the rest of his golf career. Is this his ceiling? Like, I don't know how you can get any more popular in your home country than after winning the Masters. If he wins another one, is it possible that he even bursts the roof he's already at? What if it's not a Masters? What if it's another PGA, either just regular win or championship win? I mean, can this guy get any hotter right now than he already is?
Well, golf is huge in Japan. And golf is so big. There's so many people that want to play it. And even though there's a lot of golf courses, it's really difficult to get on them. And it's even more expensive to play golf in Japan than it is here. And that's really weird because I've always looked at golf, one of the three set things that kind of take people back from golf. And prevent them from playing it as often as they would like are time, difficulty, and expense. And in Japan, you have to make a tee time weeks in advance just to go to the driving range and hit golf balls. And they have these 3 and 4 story top golf type facilities. You're not necessarily playing the top golf game. You're just hitting regular range balls at these places, but they're packed 24/7. So it is huge. And he's the Tiger Woods of Japan, if you will, right now. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if Japan honors him by making him the guy that lights the Olympic torch this summer. And there's been a lot of talk. Nick Faldo mentioned that during the Masters. If he hangs on and win this, that he wouldn't be surprised if they ask him to do that. And he's the guy that runs up to however they're going to do it. Maybe he hits a golf ball that's got a flame on it and it lights up the torch. He's got to hit a shot into the flame
pressure, but that would be so cool. I'd also love it because, when these Olympics are hosted in other countries and they do have like one of their prime athletes do that final lighting of the torch, I often don't know who the athlete is, so it's not as exciting to me. So if I saw a guy that I'd be like, oh, that's the guy. He's the green jacket guy from the airport. I saw him on a picture. I know who he is. That'd be pretty awesome. When you mention expense, I mean, $12 billion spent annually in Japan on golf. I can't imagine.
I'll tell you,
is going to be after.
I'll tell you a quick story. A friend of mine years ago, this is 30 years ago, went to Pebble Beach. And he was just there by himself, and him and his wife are riding the cart, and she's just a spectator. And the starter comes up and says, "I'd like to have you join this group of 3. It's 2 men and a woman, and they're from Japan. Do you have any issue with that?" And he wasn't going to say no, whether he did or he didn't. And he told me, he goes, it was the most fun round of golf he ever had. Only one of the 3 in the group could speak enough English to where they could communicate. The woman in the group was the best player. She shot like 76 at Pebble Beach. The other 2 broke 80. They had just gone in the pro shop and purchased everything brand new at the Pebble Beach pro shop. New clubs, new shoes, new hats, new clothes. He said they spent like $12,000 in the Pebble Beach pro shop. And then he said, one of the people that was in the group said, when we get back to Japan, we'll be able to sell this, get our money back, and pay for our trip.
Wow. That I mean, that's a smart move and a fantastic story. We'll continue some PGA talk later on with Andy. We're going to hit a quick break here. Coming up next, the high five play of the day. It's a sweet one. It's going to pull at your heartstrings. So make sure you stick it here with us on the Chris Duel Show and 1300 The Zone and Ticket 760.
1, 2. That level better, Sam?
So Andy, we'll do the high five here, and then we'll do a little more golf with the Olympic news.
Say that again. I didn't have that in there.
We'll do the high five play, and then we'll move back into PGA for the Olympic news.
Okay.
And then probably start that Tom Brady conversation that we can carry over into 7 o'clock.
Sure. That'll work.
Good morning, everyone.
Be right back.
Anthony, I checked with Sam. I believe he is feeling a little bit better this morning. He said he got some sleep last night, which is always makes someone feel a little bit better. Good luck, Sam. Second shot. Chugging the OJ. Yeah, Sam, biggest Puma, Sam Freeze holding us down. He's got a lot of production work he's handling behind the scenes this morning.
All right. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. There we go. So Troy Aikman's was drafted on this day in 1989.
Morning, Wes. Mac McClung took his name out of the transfer portal.
Who did?
Mac McClung from Tech. I mean, he's technically still in the NBA draft process, but he's
Yeah.
not really seen as
There's
draftable.
over 1,500 people in the draft portal right now.
Yeah.
So it's like 4 per team.
Yeah. And it's a really small percentage that ultimately gets recruited to a team that they are willing or wanting to play on. Wesley wants to know what your favorite place to play golf in San Antonio or favorite hole is.
Oh, wow. Well, I can answer that in one of 2 ways. It depends on your budget. If budget is not a factor,
Golf.
then I would say La Cantera is still the most fun golf course, the resort course. I'm not a big fan of the Palmer course, but I like the resort course. But I think it's somewhere in the $100 range. My favorite of the municipal golf courses is Riverside because it's fun and easy and you can make a lot of birdies. And I'm looking forward to when Almost reopens in September because it's fun. The other things, if you know people who are members of clubs and you're going to play a private club, my favorite clubs in the area are Escondido in Marble Falls and Comanche Trace in Kerrville. Favorite hole. Well, it used to be at the Republic, and that used to be one of my favorite courses before that was done. So I have to think about my favorite hole. Whichever one I birdied last, probably.
Have you ever hole in one?
Once.
Just once.
2018, the 6th hole at La Cantera. It's hard to figure out what my favorite hole would be.
Crystal show on a Friday, a wet Friday, probably a rainy Friday, at least here in the Boston area, which is all right. It makes me feel better about all the naps I take when it's gross outside. Pretty beautiful
Sleeping
the
weather.
last couple of days as the weather's gotten a little nicer, a little chilly in the morning, but better in the afternoons. Sam Freeze bringing us back in with the tunes. Andy Everett joins me today as Chris Duel is out. I'm hoping that he feels better after his shot, like this morning when he wakes up, so he can like truly have a day off, right? Because he took a sick day. He wasn't feeling well last night. He got his second shot yesterday afternoon. So it's kind of going with the thing that everyone's having. You get it, and then it's hours later until it kind of hits you. Have you gotten it yet, Andy?
I've had the first shot. I get the
That's great.
second one in a couple of weeks, and the first one I didn't do anything. And it's interesting because I've heard stories from I didn't feel a thing for it was fine, or after the second one to it was not good for about 36 hours. So
Yeah,
it's kind of all over the map. No one person to me has been the same. I guess if you had to kind of average it out, the second one has caused more issues with people than the first, but I've known some people that took the second one and never felt a thing.
I am there with you. I am done with my first, about a week and a half out from getting my second. Sam's and Chris's reactions are not making me look forward to it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So how long after the shot did you start
Yeah.
feeling bad? Okay. And then it was just gone.
Is it like an 18-hour flu? I heard about that. No thanks. I was listening to y'all's show and I heard him start to eat it and I thought, do I want to check out that video? No.
No.
No, I do not. But if you do, it is over on Ticket 760's Facebook page. That's there forever. That is now a thing that exists on the internet that didn't sound pretty, so I'm sure it didn't look pretty. But let's get into something that is pretty, which is our new segment on the show, the High Five Play of the Day, brought to you by High Five, two Greater Austin area locations, one on Anderson Lane, one out in Lakeway. Both offer, Andy, a Top Golf simulator where you not only can play Top Golf, as you know and love at the multiple Top Golf locations around the U.S., but you can play a full course. You can even play virtual soccer, virtual football, zombie dodgeball, which was a family favorite after we experienced it. Of course, I liked playing Top Golf just because I have no golf game, and I think, I sit there and I watch the PGA Tour, and I think I can make that shot. I can make that shot, but truly I could not make any shot unless it is a virtual experience. So I'm hoping after COVID has kind of gone away, at least to where we can all be together at some point, that I can maybe get some tips from you so I can at least have some
Certainly.
sort of game should I ever be invited to actually play. But getting into today's High Five Play of the Day, we got to get into him. I know he annoys some people, but at the end of the day, he is a really, really good and sweet human being. Mr. Tim Tebow, we've got to shout him out because he shouted out someone who has been a fan of his since his college days. She tuned into every game. And for her 105th birthday, Cora Bell Edison out of Jacksonville, Mississippi, or Jackson, Mississippi, wanted a birthday shout out from Mr. Tim Tebow. She told this to the local news station, Channel 12, and lo and behold, a week later, Tim Tebow answered the call. We've got that clip for you here. For those that haven't seen the video, Tim is doing this video with his giant dogs with him. You can see the giant smile on his face. Guys like that get asked to do videos, shout outs all the time. Cameo kind of became a thing in 2020 where you could pay people who are celebrities who've signed up to, get a video shout out of any sort. Mike Leach is a popular one on there. He's done wedding shout outs, birthday shout outs, engagement shout outs, random shout outs. And knowing Mike Leach, the pirate, they also come with random anecdotes. But Tim Tebow, out of the goodness of his heart, heard this story and sent this video, and you could see it on her face, just like they said, that she was blown away, enjoyed it. She calls him handsome. She's been watching every game. I mean, for people who don't care for Tim Tebow, it'd be like if, Texas fans could get Vince Young to give them a birthday shout out, right? I mean, he probably should have won that Heisman, right? And he was a national champion, and he's, kind of held on this pedestal for all Texas fans. And just, I think, a great thing, because again, guys like this get asked to do things all the time. He did it out of the goodness of his heart. Incredible moment. I don't know if you've seen the video here, Andy, but
I have.
your thoughts on Tebow. This is a very Tebow thing to do, so it's not
Well,
like it's surprising, but in a world where so much news lately, when we turn on our news channels and we see kind of it bleeds, it leads, we get a story like this from that local channel. I just think it's fantastic.
I think most athletes in a situation like this, or many athletes, would do something similar if they got the news of it. It didn't take him but 3 minutes to sit down in front of his phone and record it and send it to wherever it needed to be sent for her to get it. I have always admired Tim Tebow. I think a lot of people don't like him because he's, I guess, for lack of a better word, he's just too positive. Is it possible for anybody to always be that happy? But he is, and he's very secure with himself and whatever it is that he's doing. And he's going to be successful at it because he's one of those guys that's always been told you can't do something, and he's going to prove that he can in his way. And other athletes do it differently than he does. It's too bad he didn't have a little bit more NFL talent, because he was obviously a terrific college quarterback. But a lot of times the way that offenses were, and certainly used to be in college football, it didn't always translate to the NFL. And his baseball career probably got started off on the wrong foot just a little bit too late. Had he concentrated solely on baseball in college, he may have been able to make a better run at the major leagues. But a great story. And obviously any time that a celebrity takes some time out of their time to do something. And here's the interesting thing. She's from Mississippi and he went to Florida, and that's an SEC rivalry thing. But apparently she likes him and the Gators more than she does the schools in her state.
Well, high five to Mr. Tim Tebow for the ultimate shout out, and a very happy birthday to Corbell Edison, 105 years old. I can't even imagine. And, the fact that her guy, Tim Tebow, the ultimate birthday wish. What an exciting story.
So who would you want a birthday video from?
Justin Timberlake.
Okay.
Anything from Justin Timberlake. I could die a happy human if he even uttered a word to me. But I'd rather it be in person rather than a video. I mean, a video is fine for now, but I would rather meet him in person. But there concludes today's high five play of the day, the ultimate shout out from Mr. Tim Tebow. All right, and we talked a little bit of golf. And you kind of sent me some notes this morning. There was one thing that I was surprised to see. There's already golfers dropping out of the Olympics. Mm-hmm. It almost feels reminiscent of the Rio Olympics, where, of course, many big names decided that they weren't going to go. Now, what is the issue here? Is it coronavirus? Is it the location? Is it timing? The seasons have been kind of pushed back to back. They just want to rest. I know that's a lot of NBA players' excuses at times for not going to the Olympics. What is it here with the PGA guys?
Well, it's Adam Scott, and he said he's not going to play in the Olympics. And for him, it's a scheduling thing, because you have the British Open, or the Open Championship, the third week of July. You have another event the following, or maybe the Olympics the following one. I haven't looked at the calendar lately, but the Olympics are right after that. So you're going from England to Japan, and then back to the U.S. for the FedEx Cup right in a row. And Dustin Johnson mentioned this a few weeks ago, that he's not going to go over. Obviously, Hideki Matsuyama doesn't really have a choice. He'll be there. Here's my thought on I've said this since the golf in the Olympics was put back in 2016, and we knew that it was going to be put back in as early as 2013 and 14. There's one reason, and one reason only, for there to be golf in the Olympics in my mind. And that is that there are a number of countries that will not fund the sport unless it's an Olympic sport. Mm-hmm. And especially a lot of the third world countries. You even look at some of the major countries like China and Korea and all those countries, that they fund golf because it's in the Olympics. And then you've got the Indias, and there's great stories of golfers who've come out of India because they've, for the last 5 or 6 years, have been funding those programs in hopes to get an Olympic champion. And the heads of those sports committees in those countries they don't really care about golf majors because they've never really heard of them. They know the Olympics, they understand the Olympics, and they want their athletes to shine there, and that's where all their funding goes. So if those countries don't fund golf, then those countries are going to be less likely to have golfers to grow the game globally. But from a scheduling standpoint and from a historic standpoint, Justin Rose, who won in 2016, can win the next 10 Olympics if he lives that long. And it's not going to matter as much as the major he won when he won the U.S. Open at Marion. And so a lot of these players are looking at, and who knows what the travel restrictions are going to be. I have no idea how they're going to pull off events like the French Open in tennis and Wimbledon and the British Open unless England and the UK changes its travel restrictions. Because right now you can't do anything in that country until you go hang out in a hotel for 2 weeks in quarantine. So how are you going to go over there and play golf for 2 weeks out? And if you play in the Scottish Open before the British Open, now you're going to be there 3 weeks before the British Open. And so then you got to come back and maybe go into Japan for the Olympics. How are you going to get into that country and pass all their protocols? So there's still a lot of logistics to work out in this. And I think a lot of those golfers are going to stay in America and get ready for the FedEx Cup.
I'm very much with you on that. You mentioned, Justin Rose, he could go on and win 10 Olympics, but it wouldn't matter as much to him as winning a championship.
Or in the golf landscape.
Correct. And, that's a great way to think about it for these guys that we see week after week in the PGA. Like the Olympics for a lot of sports and a lot of athletes, it's about going to the Olympics and representing your country. But these guys represent their country week in and week out. I mean, every time we see their name with their scorecard, it's got the flag of their country, and that's who they're representing. We saw it with the Masters this year and the impact that Hideki Matsuyama has had on his country. Now, I know if he goes and wins in the Olympics, they're going to cheer just as much and have just as much enthusiasm. But for guys like Jordan Spieth and Tiger Woods, who, practice year in and year out to win these championships and have won a couple of their own, they've represented their country in those. And I don't know that they feel the same way about the Olympics. For them, it might be more about the experience of actually playing in an Olympics, but not something that they necessarily are gunning for every 4 years, unless you're Ricky Fowler, where you can't seem to really win anything else, or if you're Matt Kuchar and can get yourself he got silver or bronze in the last Olympics, I believe, but he did medal, bronze. And it was like, he's that's Ricky, our guy, that's our Ricky representative Fowler, this year.
Ricky Fowler has the Olympic rings tattooed on his arm,
right? And I think that's like the thing, right? When you go to the Olympics, a lot of people, which I understand. Again, we've talked about tattoos a lot on this show, just because Chris and I we don't have any.
And neither do I, or nor will I ever.
So it's interesting to me when people get tattoos, because I'm like, that's permanent, that's forever. But I understand when people who go to the Olympics, feel that way and get a tattoo of the Olympic rings. And again, even though he's obviously played in those bigger tournaments, he's yet to really win one. And so the chance to go to the Olympics and be an Olympian, that is something that's like winning the Super Bowl. That's something no one can take away from you.
I think the players really enjoy that. I think the thing they like the most is being able to walk in the parade of champions at the beginning of the deal with other athletes, because other athletes admire what other athletes do in their respective sports. Mm-hmm. But the timing and logistics of it with the PGA Tour really makes it difficult for them to do everything.
Yeah. And I always feel bad for the few athletes who their events start like the next day, the next morning, so they're not able to walk because they need that so crucial rest and to just be calm prior to their big moment. But we'll keep an eye on the Olympics. Of course, for now, they are a go in Tokyo this summer. It'll be interesting to see not only PGA Tour players continue to drop out or say that they aren't heading to the Olympics, but the NBA players, as we know from the last Olympics, decided that they just didn't want to put that on their bodies. They wanted to rest instead. Chris Duel Show with Andy Everett, myself, Shannon Salty Sweeney, and Sam Freeze behind the glass. We'll get into this Tom Brady news because he's kind of throwing a hissy fit over this numbers rules change. We'll get into it next. It's the Chris Duel Show on Ticket 760 and AM 1300 The Zone.
Yeah, Louisa, sorry about that. Without Chris, we don't get the studio sound. And Sam is not on the stream because he has got a lot of production work, a lot of behind-the-scenes work that we do here. I wish it was just coming on and talking into the microphone, but it's not.
A lot more to go.
I myself have way more than I'd like to do on a Friday after today's show. And Andy, did you want to read the sports history and birthdays?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just read them and then we can comment on them.
You probably have more commentary for the birthdays and history than I do. When I looked over them, I was like, "Who?"
Yeah. Well, I obviously know Bud Wilkinson and Warren Spahn, and I guess a little bit of Tony Esposito, but I don't know anything about Chloe Kim.
Oh, I know that one. She's the snowboarder.
Yeah.
She was, I think, 17 at the last Winter Olympics.
And then I know all the names on the sports history. Do you do birthdays first or sports history first?
He does history first.
Okay.
It's John Cena's birthday too.
That is correct. We got James though at 8. And is there music or is it just turned down? Okay, that's fine. I thought Ryan said we would change it out intermittently.
Chris probably is happy, Sam. Spurs get a win. Astros get a win. Most importantly, the Mavericks get a win. Good morning, Laura. Yeah, Wesley, I've got like a big work week planned. I like get my second shot on a Monday afternoon. So I really, if I get sick at all, I need it to just be Tuesday. Because I got stuff to do.
Yeah, I took mine this past Monday. I got 2 more weeks to go.
Which one did you get?
Pfizer.
And
I guess everybody says that if you do have side effects after that second shot, you know it's working because it basically shocked your system.
it's like a test of how healthy you actually are. Yeah, Wes, that 28 to 32 hours after my shot is not going to work for me.
Yeah, get it over with. If you're going to get sick, just get sick and get it over with.
Sam, why can't I see John Cena? Is that a play on his last name? $17. That's a weird birthday. Because 16, you're like, yes, you can drive.
Now.
17 is like, okay, I can see rated R movies, but I've already been watching those. And 18 is, you're on to college. What happened?
I happened to be one back in the day that when I turned 18, that was then the legal drinking age. And before I turned 21, they changed it.
That happened to my mom too. She could drink for like 6 whole months and then they changed it.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, not that I really did, because I've never have really liked that much alcohol to begin with, but I turned 18, and and so I turned 21 in 1985, and in November of 1984 is when the law changed.
See, Sam, I did not know that. I did not know he had a catchphrase.
Good morning and welcome into the 7 o'clock hour of the Chris Duel Show. My name is Shannon Sweeney. You may call me Salty, as I am typically one with a little bit of salt. Chris Duel out this morning. He got his second COVID shot yesterday afternoon, started feeling under the weather last night during that Spurs broadcast. I'm sure he left feeling a little bit better after that Spurs win, a win at home, no less, which is great for them as they've struggled to play on their own court this year. But we're hoping he feels even better this morning so that, he's got the day off now. Hopefully he can make things happen, have some fun. I don't know what the weather's looking like in San Antonio today. If you're in Austin, it's going to be a wet one. I believe
Thunderstorms
coming later this evening. So I'm going to be inside just hanging out with my dogs, as I like to do anyway on a Friday, because that's just kind of the gal I am. Joining me is Mr. Andy Everett, who, thank you so much for, you want to talk about coming in last minute. I mean, I was almost in bed when it came down that Chris was like, no, man, I'm out. I'm tapping out. And I was like, that's totally fine. I get it. But you even texted me and were like, "Hey, do you have any ideas?" And I was like, "Dude, I'm at dinner and then I'm going to bed." So I think I hit you up at like 4 this morning when I got up. But thank you so much for joining me. Sam Freeze here as well. He is still riding the bench a little bit, coming off his second COVID shot, but I think he's feeling a lot better today, which says a lot because I think he tried to lay on the floor at work yesterday, which we do have people that come and clean the iHeart studios in both Austin and San Antonio, but still a lot of footprints around the floors here, and you can't clean everywhere, right? That's only it's a small crew. So I don't know. I feel like if there's one place you could get COVID in an iHeart station, it would maybe be on the floor because oh my goodness, no. But Sam is here today, so we thank you so much for joining us, especially after you battled through yesterday. You are definitely a trooper. Head over to our Ticket 760 and AM 13 on the Zone Twitter page. We're asking you today, what Texas athletic sporting event are you most looking forward to this weekend? It is a big, big weekend for Texas athletics, most notably Texas volleyball playing in the championship game against Kentucky on Saturday night. That follows their win last night, a sweep, in fact, over the formerly undefeated Wisconsin Badgers. And they had a shorter season, though. They only played, I believe, 18 games leading up to that Texas match, where Texas, I believe, right now 27-1, Kentucky 23-1. So that will be an amazing matchup. Texas typically finds Stanford in this volleyball tournament where they ultimately get knocked out, but they did not come across them this year. So I'm very much looking forward to that game. As some of you know, I will be at a wedding on Saturday. I'm looking forward to it. It's a great family friend that's getting married. I actually ran into the entire family last night at dinner. They were having some pre-wedding festivities. But man, there's a lot going on because on top of Texas volleyball, you've got Texas baseball trying to continue that currently 14-game winning streak where they will take on number 24 ranked Oklahoma State in Stillwater, as well as the orange and white game, which is always something that all Texas fans look forward to. It's always a free event. It's always a fun event. There's usually extra stuff going on. I'm not too sure about this year just because there is still COVID that is very much a part of this. They are asking to wear a mask and social distance, as well as that clear bag policy is in place I hate that policy, by the way. Just check my regular bag. I don't want to have to go out and buy a clear bag, but nonetheless, clear bag. That game is at 1 o'clock at DKR. You can also check it out on LHN. So just head over to our Twitters and go ahead and vote right now. Most people looking forward to that volleyball championship game. Not too surprising, but I know that not everyone is into volleyball as maybe they should be. But they are a pretty dominant team for Texas, and year in year out they are a team to watch. Orange and white game coming in at 28% of the vote, and baseball at 10% of the vote. As I said, Mr. Andy Everett is joining me this morning. Andy, which of these would you be most looking forward to?
Well, I think the spring game, because you want to see what Texas is going to be like. And I've mentioned this for 10 years now on various shows. I went to Oklahoma. I want OU to win every game they play. But unlike including the game that's the second Saturday in October every year, but the thing that I think that OU fans and Texas fans have to understand, even though we were born to not want each other to do well, we need each other to do well in order for our wins against each other to matter. And a 6-6 or a 7-5 Texas team, if you beat them, so what? You beat a mediocre team. But if you go to 12-0 and the other team goes 11-1, and you happen to have that be on the top side, both of you are probably going to be in consideration for the Final Four, or at least the championship game, to determine which one will go to the Final Four, and you'll play each other again. So I think it's important to see that, and hopefully Steve Sarkisian can make Texas competitive again and at a higher level that they were maybe 10 to 12 years ago.
You're right. It's a toxic relationship that Texas and OU are in, because we do need each other to succeed, and yet we don't want to see each other succeed one bit. And when it comes to that orange and white game, right now the narrative is Sark has come in. He's, the vibe has changed. Players are happy to be there. They're excited for practice. Coaches are coming with energy. It's a whole new momentum going into next season. Everyone's feeling some type of way. It's all positivity. They're all gas, no brakes. Everyone seems to have bought in. And now this spring game, everyone who has been, hearing all these things from the outside is now getting to go into DKR, getting to turn on their TVs and watch this new era take place for the first time. And hopefully the narrative will just continue, that we are going in the right direction with Sark and his crew. But you never know. People are nitpicky. People will probably find things to take out of it and say this thing needs to change before the start of the season. I personally believe the biggest conversation will be about the quarterbacks, and who, based off of this one practice scrimmage that just happens to be in front of people and on TV, people will start saying this guy or this guy for my starter, because we are without the longer.
Fans don't really get it when it comes to who the quarterback is, because they'll go to a scrimmage and they'll see somebody throw a 70-yard pass or escape, a Houdini-like move in the pocket, and then all of a sudden, well, that's the guy. But then the coaches go back and do all the grading, and he did everything wrong, and then just his athleticism got him out of that issue, and most of the time that won't work. I can remember one year when I was in college, there was a freshman defensive end that had like 14 tackles in the first game, and everybody was just amazed. And back in those days at OU, they had the grades each week of the player on the wall so that they would see what they graded out film-wise. And he was graded a C-. And I asked one of the coaches, I said, he had 14 tackles. How could he have a C-? He said he didn't make any single tackle the correct way. He just out athletic everybody. And so the coaches are looking not only for you to do it, but to do it correctly, because if you do it correctly, you'll be more successful with it. So just because you think quarterback A should be the quarterback, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the quarterback.
Yeah, quarterback battle going on between Casey Thompson and Hudson Card. I'm sure both will get plenty of playing time this weekend. Now, keeping with football, the NFL earlier this week released some rule changes that they have approved, one of them being in regards to jersey numbers. And so players that would typically wear probably higher numbers can now wear lower numbers if they so choose. And Mr. Tom Brady is not a fan. Let me read you the rule real quick, which was adopted on Wednesday. It allows quarterbacks, punters, and place kickers to wear numbers 1 through 19, defensive backs 1 through 49, and then running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers 149 and 80 through 89. Offensive linemen can wear 50 to 79, defensive linemen 50 to 79 and 90 to 99, and linebackers 1 through 59 and 90 through 99. Now, Tom Brady took to his Instagram as well as Twitter, saying that, why even have numbers, just have different jersey colors. It's going to make it a lot harder for guys like him to read the defenses. and he said there will be a lot of bad football because of this. And then someone took that quote, which he then retweeted, and he said he'd like to speak to the manager. So he is calling himself out as a Karen for his take on this jersey rule change. Now, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, for me, it seems like NFL was like, oh, this is a great marketing tool here, because if we have some hot players like D Hop, maybe not a crazy number for a wide receiver, but he is considering going back to 6, which he wore when he was at Cleveland. Right now, he's number 10. A lot of people buy D Hop jerseys. He changes his number. A lot of people are going to buy the new D Hop jerseys. So if big time players end up changing their numbers because of this rule, that's a lot of extra income that the NFL would love to see, specifically those teams. I don't know if that's all of the reason of why they went and changed this rule, but they certainly didn't ask Tom Brady for his opinion when they changed it.
Well, the kind of the cool thing, I guess, right now with a lot of high school and college players is to wear a single digit number regardless of what position that you play. And Matt Rule did this at Baylor. Jeff Traylor has adopted this at UTSA, and I'm sure other coaches have done things similarly. Is that you have to earn the numbers, and whether you consider 0 a number or a digit, but you have to earn the numbers 0 through 9 in practice, in the spring practice and in the fall practice. And right before the season, the players and coaches vote on who's going to wear those numbers. And obviously, you can have duplicate numbers in college, so you basically have you have 20 players that could wear the numbers 0 through 9. One side on offense, one side on defense. And in UTSA's case, since San Antonio's in the 210 area code, 0, 1, and 2 are considered the most tough or the most respected of numbers that each of the players get. And they compete for these numbers, and then the coaches may have a wild card here or there if there's a senior that's really deserving of it that a player may have overlooked. They try to get as many of those numbers as they possibly can. So last year, UTSA had Frank Harris and Rashad Wisdom both wearing number 0. And they had a defensive lineman wearing number 2 or number 1. And so they just kind of mix all this up. And in college, there's no rule as to what you have to wear. I think the interior linemen have to wear between 50 and 79 on offense. But other than that, there is no rule. But the NFL adopted the rule so that officials could easily determine which players were illegally downfield or lined up incorrectly. And it's easy to see that if number 57 is going out for a pass, he shouldn't be. And I don't think we'll ever get to that. But if you go back and look at the day, I think it was Red Grange was a quarterback halfback in the old days, and he wore number 77. And they adopted all these rules to make it more uniform back in the 60s or 70s and move forward from there. But I like the idea that you can have whatever number you want pretty much now. And people and athletes will brand themselves with that number. I think there was a time back in the 80s, Brian Bosworth wore 44 in college. And he created a company called 44 Boz Incorporated. And when he got to the NFL and at Denver, they wouldn't let him wear 44 because linebackers could not wear the number 44 at the time. So he switched to 55 and then still used the logo and even had jerseys made with 55 and a circle crossed out that he sold to opponents through his own company. So players use their number to brand themselves with. And a lot of times an athlete is known more for the number they wear than the name that's on the back of that jersey. So I think this is kind of cool for the NFL. Now, I don't think the NFL can allow coaches to make players earn those single digit numbers because they have to have all that set up well in advance. And the NFL is going to market those for dollars and cents just as much as the player is.
We'll continue this conversation on numbers in the NFL right after we give you the keyword for your next shot at winning $1,000. It is our cash contest. We run it 12 times a day. Listen closely. Here's that keyword. What an awesome opportunity. $1,000. You head over to ticket760.com or am1300thezone.com, whichever your pleasure, and enter that keyword for your shot to win $1,000. Again, we do that 12 times a day. So keep listening, even after the Chris Duel. Listen through the mid-afternoon. Listen to Mike Taylor. He's got your shots to win as well with more keywords. We're talking about the number change that the NFL has allowed to take place. Tom Brady is not happy about them. You just mentioned how players use numbers to market themselves, and Tom Brady being that guy, right? TB12 has turned
Absolutely.
into, I believe he even started his own agency of sorts where he's partnering with other athletes. You know, he's got his T-shirts. He wore one, I believe, on the boat after winning that Super Bowl, and they went. He tossed his fancy new trophy. Now that he's got so many, I guess he just doesn't care about them anymore. But I think that's an incredible point. I think of soccer, where 10 is seen as kind of the ultimate number, the playmaker, the midfielder, the main person on the team, the main attraction. You know, you've got Lionel Messi, you've got Carly Lloyd for the U.S. Women's National Team, you've got Neymar, so many great players. You know, then sometimes number 7, right, Ronaldo, Beckham, but number 10 is always seen as like that prime coveted number. Is there? You know, I think of 12 and I think of Tom Brady. I think of Peyton Manning. You know, up in Indianapolis, Andrew Luck sported number 12. Of course, we have number 11, Carson Wentz, now going to, I believe, what did he go to? Number 2, following his trade over to the Indianapolis Colts. But, you know, I guess 12 in my mind is a great quarterback number if you're in the NFL, just because of the attachment I have with players that are, you know, one is going into the Hall of Fame this year. One is certainly going into the Hall of Fame when he finally leaves the league and is then eligible to get in. But is there a number in your mind? You mentioned Matt Rule and having to earn number 0 through 9 or digit 0 through 9 that he would then pass out to players based on performance. So are those considered the more coveted numbers in the NFL, in your opinion?
I think they're the more coveted numbers in college football. But one of the reasons why the NFL did this is that there are a lot of teams that ask for more leniency on what they can do with players, because so many of the numbers, a lot of teams have numbers that are retired. Like the Cowboys aren't going to give out 22 to anybody anytime soon. They've been doing 88. They've been passing that along with, you know, Drew Pearson and Michael Irvin and now CeeDee Lamb. So that number's kind of sacred, but it's not retired. But some teams have retired numbers. You know, if you look at in Major League Baseball, you never used to see numbers 76 and 85 and, you know, Aaron Judge is 99. But in the case of the Yankees, most all their single digit numbers have been retired for decades. So nobody ever has those numbers again. And they're going to eventually run out unless they start putting a third digit on the uniform. So I think that was one of the reasons why the NFL was a little bit more lenient with it, because if the New England Patriots ever give number 12 to somebody else, that's sacrilegious, basically, because it only belongs to one person in their history.
So in your opinion, is Tom Brady fair to make the assessment that why even have numbers? Let's just have jerseys.
Well, you got to have numbers to be able to identify players, because that's how fans identify people from the stands. In college football, the NFL, thank goodness, doesn't do this. They've adopted a different rule, and I think the SEC has adopted a rule that the number on the jersey and the jersey color has to be contrasting. Mm-hmm. And I have two issues from a play-by-play standpoint. Number one, if you put these metallic numbers on you put a white number on or a yellow number on a white jersey, you can't see it unless you're on high definition TV. And I never look at the monitor when I'm calling a game except to watch a replay. I'm calling it as I see it. So I need to see the number. And then the other thing, and Oregon was the one that started this with these crazy looking uniforms. These metallic numbers that they put on jerseys seem to look cool when you show them to the kids and they love them, but you can't see them in the stands. So not only can the broadcasters not see them, the coaches in the booth have no idea which receiver went to which side of the field. And more importantly, the fans in the stands can't pick out which one's their kid just based on the number. Because unless you're sitting really close, you can't see that far to determine sometimes 88 from 86. And then from my standpoint, I'm kind of colorblind. So I need some contrast to be able to tell the difference. And a few years ago, when the Jets and Bills played that color rush game where they were both where the Jets were wearing all green and the Bills were wearing all red, that was driving me crazy the whole game to try to figure out who had the ball. So the most important thing for me is, they've got to have a number on there because you have to be able to identify players. And that's basically how fans have always identified who their player is, whether they're watching it on TV or sitting in the stands.
That's like me when I watch a Notre Dame or Penn State game. They don't have their names on the back of the jerseys. And I know a couple of names because they're big star players, but I don't have their numbers memorized. So I can't ever tell if that's the guy that I'm supposed to be looking out for or if that's just, his counterpart on the other side of the ball. I can't stand it. I get that they are some of the more iconic uniforms in the college football game and that they've just never had names on the back of their jerseys. But please, I need them.
And I think, obviously Notre Dame and Penn State come to mind in football, and Indiana and, maybe a couple other schools come to mind in basketball that don't put the names on the backs of their jerseys. For me, basketball, it's more important because the fans are closer to you. For me in football, I can't, the numbers are the names on the back of a jersey are too small from the distance I'm seeing it from 300 yards up in the press box. So I'm just looking at numbers, and I can memorize names and numbers relatively quickly still. So that to me is the more contrast that you can give with the number in the jersey, the better. But I think for basketball, unless you're one of those really traditional schools, it looks like when you take the name off the jersey that something's missing because it's not centered correctly or the number is not the right size. And every now and then you get one of these coaches that gets upset with their players and go, well, we're going to play for the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back. And the only person that you're hurting is your fans because they can't tell who your players are. Especially on TV. They haven't necessarily memorized all the numbers. They just know the one or two that they like.
That's some coach speak if I've ever.
Exactly.
It's a great recruiting tool when you have the name on the back of that jersey.
Yes.
The kid that comes in and he, has the one picture where he's pointing to the front name of the school on his chest, but then he does the one where he turns around and he points his thumb at his back name, the number he wants that he probably isn't going to get if he signs there anyway because somebody else already has it, but he's got his name on it. I always think that's exactly a recruiting tool. All right, moving on. We've got the Salty Shakedown next, but before that, sports history, sports birthday. Andy's going to take us through that. We've got John Cena today. I didn't know that he was. I wonder how old he is. He seems like he's older than what he looks like, but I don't know. He's grown out his hair. It makes him look younger these days. We'll get into it. It's the Chris Duel Show on Ticket 760 and AM 1300 The Zone.
See, Louisa, that's what I'm saying. I need the name.
All right, hang on here. All right, so I'll do sports history first and then birthdays.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. How do you study the rosters each year? Like, can you just look over the roster list and then you're good after a couple once-overs of number and name?
For basketball, yes. For basketball, this year when we went to the conference tournament, the women's announcer for UTSA couldn't go, and they asked me to do the game, and they were playing on a Tuesday, and we weren't playing till Wednesday, so I did. I hadn't seen the women play a game probably in 10 years. Within 3 possessions, I had the both rosters memorized, and I have no idea how to do that. How to tell people to do that. I just can do it. For football, I basically pay attention to the numbers of the running backs, receivers, and quarterback. The rest of them aren't relevant until they do something in the game. But
don't do something like that one offensive lineman who just
And typically for the other team, because I'll have UTSA's skill position players and pretty much the entire roster memorized before the first game, just because when I create my spotter boards and I create my own stuff so that I can have reinforcement when I'm writing down when I'm putting numbers, and I put everything on a computer spreadsheet because I can't read my own handwriting. So I it's all laid out for me to be able to quickly identify them. And then the other players, the other team for football, quarterback, running back, receivers, and then defense. The main guys, there's always one guy on a team that makes 14 tackles a game, so you need to know who he is. The rest just kind of come as it happens.
I don't know if I've asked you this before. Do you know who David Onion is?
I don't.
He's I don't know his official job title, but he recently moved from Texas to UTSA. I know he's affiliated with the athletic program in some way, but he's.
I haven't met him. I don't know what his role is.
Yeah, well, I'm sure because I don't even think he's really been down the campus that much just because of COVID.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but with basketball, it's typically because about 90% of the teams put the names on the backs of their jerseys. Division II teams don't. In Conference USA, Marshall's the only team that doesn't.
Is that a money thing too?
Well, it depends on who. If you have somebody that can, because most of that stuff's sewn on. They just have a nameplate and then they just sew it to the back of the jersey because obviously those jerseys are going to rotate from. And most schools change jerseys at least every 2 to 3 years, if not every year, to update them or to make them. So. Yeah, UTSA kind of changed it up last year when they started doing these 0 through 9 numbers because they don't have who those players are until typically maybe a week before the first game. So you don't necessarily have and then every year players want to change numbers because if you were a freshman last year and a senior left and you want that player's number, now you can go get it if it's not 0 through 9. Sam's making me feel old. He was 1 when I turned 21. So we got the Rams thing. Did you see that staffer for WWE got fired for sending that package?
Yeah. Yep.
And then the bowling story.
I guess it's their stuff.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. This feels like a Friday song. I don't know who sings this one, Sam. Okay. Just feels good. Just feels like spring and summertime as we're getting to that kind of weather. Looking forward to laying out by the pool. I need a tan. I need a tan in a bad way. Okay. I'm wearing a black dress to this wedding tomorrow, and I'm gonna look invisible because I'm so white. And and you got to understand how fair my skin is here. Okay. When I start the tanning season, I can only go out for 10, 15 minutes at a time, or I will roast and come out looking like a hot Cheeto. And it is bad. And it lasts almost the entire summer at that point. I'm one and done. I've got to get it right the first time. So I've got to go out in increments here. But I won't start this weekend. Of course, the weather today in Austin not looking so hot. Thunderstorms predicted for this afternoon. And I think, Andy, you said San Antonio kind of looking the same way at this point, which is unfortunate for you because I'm sure you'd love to go hit the links this afternoon if you could.
Well, yeah, but it's going to be perfect. 87 and sunshine and no rain, no weekend. So
okay,
so Saturday and Sunday will be fine.
Yes. That's awesome. All right, well, let's get into it. It's time now for Sports History and Sports Birthday, hosted by Mr. Andy Everett this morning.
All right, on this day in sports history, back in 1939, Ted Williams hits his first home run. Ted Williams may be considered, Ty Cobb would probably disagree, but most people consider Ted Williams the greatest hitter of all time. In my era, Tony Gwynn was, but Ted Williams certainly in that conversation. We take this for granted these days, but in 1950, the first major league game completed under the lights finished with the Phillies beating the Braves 6-5. Can you imagine baseball without night?
No. When do people work if
games?
They're just watching baseball all day? There's something about playing under the lights.
There's a PBS story that the former NBC anchorman John Chancellor narrates, and he was talking about there was a lot of baseball owners that didn't think night baseball would work back in the 40s and 50s until they started doing it and realized, hey, people can go to work and now come to the game. This is a thing we need to do, because a lot of teams would play with portable lights. And the old Negro leagues back in the day they would travel with lights and set them up the day before they play, and then play like 5 games a day for 4 or 5 days in a row, and people would come out and watch. And that's kind of where the Major League Baseball got its idea for that, and now it's pretty much the norm. 1954, Hank Aaron hits his first of 755 home runs on this date. Many of you still consider him the all-time home run king. Even at 762. I kind of don't care. Hank Aaron was great in his day, and Barry Bonds was great in his day. So, and if people consider it cheating that he got to 762, so be it. But he's got 7 more according to the records. Joe Morgan was a pretty good hitter for the Cincinnati Reds during the day. But in 1978, his 91 consecutive errorless game at second base ended on this day. So he went 91 straight games without committing an error, which pretty good. That's why he won some Gold Gloves. In 1989, on this day, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar played his last game as a Laker. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was my first favorite basketball player. And I even remember him when he was Lou Alcindor. And that was when he first came into the league. He played for Milwaukee and then was traded to LA a few years later. But Kareem Abdul-Jabbar played his last game on this day about 32 years ago. And then on this day in 1989, Troy Aikman was the first pick of the Dallas Cowboys. Changed the Cowboys' history. Here's my Troy Aikman story and some of you will remember this. The first football game that I ever got to broadcast was when I was a student at Oklahoma on the campus radio station at OU. And Troy Aikman was the starting wishbone quarterback for the 1985 Oklahoma Sooners, who beat Texas 14-7 that day in the Cotton Bowl. And then Troy decided option football is not for me, and he got hurt. Jamel Holloway took over, and Troy had to go to UCLA, and Troy's made way more money than Jamel Holloway ever did playing football. But
I was going to say, who?
Well, Jamel Holloway is considered the best wishbone quarterback, most likely in the history of the wishbone, or at least in Oklahoma lore he is. And I'm sure there's some Texas fans that will throw out some other names in there, but Barry Switzer, who was part of the invention of the wishbone, will tell you that Jamel Holloway was the best at it. But Troy Aikman was drafted by the Cowboys, and Jamel Holloway was not drafted. Also, last year on this date that Joe Burrow, the first pick, days in sports history. It's time to get into sports birthdays. 1916. If he were alive, he'd be 105 today, and that's Bud Wilkinson. He was the one that basically created football at OU because no one cared before he got there.
He could see him now.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Only he could see him now. I mean, nobody likes them, but if only he could see them now.
Well, you can't say nobody because there are some OU fans that do listen to this show from time to time. 100 years old if he were still alive today. Warren Spahn, World Series MVP back in the 50s, Cy Young Award winner, and born in Buffalo, New York back in 2003. 1943, Tony Esposito, Canadian Hockey Hall of Fame goaltender, born in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada. This date, 1943. And 21 years ago today, American snowboarder and Olympic gold medalist Chloe Kim, born in Torrance, California.
Chloe Kim, I'm very much hoping that we get the next Winter Olympics because she was astounding to watch as I believe 17 at the time during that last Olympics when she showed up on the scene and made a huge splash. She is quite the athlete. And I always wish I could snowboard. I've tried it. It's too claustrophobic. I got to stick to skiing, but the shoes are so much more comfortable and you look so much cooler when you're doing it.
Well, I've actually seen a video of somebody snowboarding, but I can't say that I've ever watched a sporting event that snowboarding was a part of.
You never saw the Flying Tomato, Shaun White, at the Olympics. At all those gold medals he's won, and you haven't. I'm a little disappointed in you, Andy, because that is like the winter event. At least for me, I always enjoy them. All right, that concludes today's sports birthdays, as well as John Cena. Shout out to the man who has grown his hair out and appears in almost every other commercial I see on live television these days. I mean, not doing much in the WWE anymore, but doing a lot by way of movies and commercial making. So congratulations to him. Get that bread and happy birthday. But it is time now for today's Salty Shakedown.
All right. The first of these.
This is me, man.
Oh, this is you?
Me here.
Okay, go for it. All right.
But I do want your takes on this, though.
All right.
Because my first story today is we're kind of going to call it bowling with dad. But it's not what you think. I mean, as a kid growing up, I enjoyed going to the bowling lanes with my dad. My mom wasn't ever really interested, so it'd just be some daddy-daughter time. As a kid, luckily, they let me put the bumpers up. Not so much anymore. I'm not the greatest bowler. But this gentleman, unfortunately, his father passed away a couple of years ago, and bowling was something he and his dad did. They were both quite good bowlers. In fact, his dad had scored 298 and 299 before. He had never scored a perfect game, unlike his son, who has done it before. But his son, after his father's death, his father was cremated. Took him a couple of years to find someone who could then put a hole in the bowling ball and then fill it with his father's ashes. Well, he finally got that done. He took the bowling ball to the alley, and he told his brother beforehand, I'm going to bowl a perfect game. And lo and behold, he went out and did it. It's absolutely incredible. A, because he can bowl a perfect game. That just blows my mind. And the fact that it's not his first perfect game, it just happened to be the first time he was using this specialty-made ball. doing it with his father, probably the most creative thing I think I've ever heard of someone doing with someone's ashes. But you said you love this story, Andy. Tell us why.
Well, I like this story because I think for most of us, at least for me, I was introduced to watching sports, watching it with my dad, and so I 1971 Milwaukee, Washington, or Baltimore NBA Finals, with which he started. And the reason I played golf is because my dad did. And so my dad got me into playing golf when I was 9 or 10 years old, insisted that I take lessons. And we played lots of golf together growing up. And for me, one of the, I guess, say somewhat emotional things, when I made my first trip to Scotland in 2007, I knew so much about the golf courses over there because of he and I talking about it when I was a kid, and we would watch the golf tournaments on the British Open on TV. And I just wish that he would have had the opportunity to go over there and experience that as I did. What I've been twice, 2 other times since, but the first time's always the most unique. And he was, I think he would have absolutely
mentioned John Cena is celebrating his birthday today. He, of course, a big part of the WWE. WWE just recently hosted WrestleMania 37, and after the fact, they actually let go of a number of wrestlers. And yesterday, Mickie James, a 5-time women's champion, posted on Twitter a picture of her care package because she was let go from the WWE. And the care package was a trash bag filled with, I guess, her stuff that was mailed out to her. Now, keep in mind, the WWE brought in $934 million just in the year of 2020. And you think about, live events are such a huge part of an income for something like that. And they didn't have as many by way of fans. They did a lot of streams. But I don't know. I feel like they could have done a little bit better than a trash bag in a box. Chief Branding Officer Stephanie McMahon apologized on Twitter and said the person responsible has been let go. It's probably heartbreaking for Miss Mickie James to be relieved from her duties with the WWE, but then as a parting gift be sent a quote unquote care package that is a trash bag. Your thoughts on this story, Andy?
Well, to me, when I first read it, I thought, well, this was kind of some kind of a gag that everybody got around and decided that there was some tie to it with the way that she performed. Mm-hmm. But apparently, I don't know, they run out of boxes to put her stuff in. I have no idea, but it kind of seems like a slap in the face to send somebody a trash bag unless there was some underlying reason why that was part of the joke or whatever, but apparently not very funny to the WWE.
Yeah, and apparently now no longer funny to whoever it was responsible for sending the care package because, as we said, he or she is now out of a job and in search of a new one. All right, finally, as we know, the draft is coming up, and the Rams have rented a 9,000 square foot mansion in Malibu to host as their draft house. It almost sounds like it should be a reality series where you almost put all your draftees into one house and you just follow them around. But it is their ultimate war room. Cliff Kingsbury, who last year became kind of a hot commodity after that picture of him in his home in Arizona, just sitting back with his beautiful landscaping and his giant living room, checking out the draft. He won't be doing that this year because they will be back in their regular offices for their war room. But the Rams deciding to put up shop in this 9,000 square foot home. And by the way, they don't even draft on day one unless they somehow trade up. They don't have a draft until the second round. So I guess they're just going to be hanging out in this mansion up until that second round. I think it's a pretty cool idea. Cliff Kingsbury joked that it's just because Sean McVay wanted a pool nearby so he could go take his shirt off just like he did in Hard Knocks last year. But, it's been really interesting during, last year. Not only did we have Cliff Kingsbury at home, we saw the head coach of the Patriots, Mr. Bill, sitting at his kitchen table with his dog kind of randomly coming in at times and sitting on his chair when he'd go into the kitchen to get something to eat. So this will be pretty cool. I hope they give us an inside tour of this 9,000 square foot home. Like, I don't want to just see the one room where y'all are all set up. I want to see all of it. I'm sure it'll be a major point for people to check out during the draft. Just another story about this draft that is quite interesting because, as we know, it is going to be live in Cleveland, but the Rams coming to you live from Malibu this year. No, I've been to Disneyland.
Played a game at Pepperdine, I don't know, 10 years ago. And 9,000 square foot homes on the beach overlooking that was infinity pools and all that. I think they're kind of a dime a dozen out there, except they're not a dime. They're, unless you're counting that in millions. But that Pepperdine campus in Malibu has got to be one of the most scenic places. I don't know how you ever get anything done in the classroom because you're just kind of staring out at the ocean the whole time, wishing you were out there surfing or boating or whatever it is that you like to do in the ocean. But this is cool. And I like the Cliff Kingsbury saying this is so Sean McVay to try to one-up me from last year. So cool for the Rams. And if you don't have anybody to draft in the first round, your war room can be pretty much wherever you want. You wait for the phone to ring if somebody wants to make a deal with you.
Well, and interesting to note that this draft house is being sponsored by, I believe, Rocket Mortgage. And that seems new to me, too, with the NFL, that I saw someone say, well, what if the Cowboys did it on Jerry's yacht? And then they have that sponsored and it's a whole thing. And I'm like, that sounds cool, except it would scare me on a yacht. What if the Wi-Fi goes out? What if there's no service? What if our 5 minutes is up and we just miss a draft pick? I mean, that would be the ultimate fail, but very much a Cowboys kind of fail. If I would
imagine there's not only one Wi-Fi unit in that house, there's about 10, just in case one of them goes out. And if they were on Jerry's yacht, he'd have a satellite dish out there as well, just in case the Wi-Fi went down.
It'll be interesting to see as we kind of go away from the COVID life of all the social distancing and keeping separate, if something like this comes into play as part of the NFL draft. I think the NFL draft in recent years, obviously with their stage setups alone and all the other festivities that tend to go on, I specifically remember Nashville, all the performances they had. If they'll do stuff like this with these teams just to create a little bit more interest from people who maybe aren't as into the actual draft, kind of like me. I'm not into setting up all these players because, half of them end up being busts anyway. Right. I want to see what you do for me on the field when you get there. And I really just care about the Dallas Cowboys pick, which I'm sure if Jerry has any say, he'll ruin it for us. We, of course, will talk about that with James Allen. That concludes today's Salty Shakedown. As I mentioned, James Allen, of course, he is part of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a huge Dallas Cowboys fan, sits next to Jerry Jones in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, Jerry Jones was part of, I don't know if it was planned or not, but he just kind of showed up when Kyle Pitts was being interviewed by the Dallas Cowboys. Pretty interesting, as Jerry being Jerry made next to no sense in that conversation. Now, the Cowboys, of course, with the 10th pick in the NFL draft, most people say they should go defense. I'm one of those people. However, it wouldn't be too surprising if they did go with an offensive lineman, considering how much money they just paid Dak and the protection that he needs around him, because you don't want a guy that's taking up that much of your dollar bills, y'all, to be hurt and not playing. You need him to be active, and good at that. You need him to have all the time in the world to sit back and throw to the many options the Cowboys currently have. Other than that O-line, I think they're pretty set. But him talking to Kyle Pitts, I don't know if he'll last till 10. But Andy, your thoughts if he is there and then the Cowboys end up grabbing him?
Well, if he lasted 10, I think you have to take him because he's a once in a lifetime tight end from what people are saying. He's the next Tony Gonzalez or somebody of that ilk. The Cowboys definitely need 2 or 3 defensive players and 2 or 3 offensive linemen with the rest of their picks. But if it doesn't cost them a lot to move up, or if he does fall to 10, I think you got to take him, because then you'd have a 4th receiver in that receiving core that basically becomes another flexed out wide receiver and can also play tight to the line if necessary. So Jerry's not passing on Kyle Pitts if he's there, but I don't know how much he wants to give up to get him if he goes earlier.
At face value, it seems pretty straightforward that the Cowboys should just take somebody for defense at number 10. Of course, depending on who's available at the time. Last year, we just talked about his yacht. Jerry spent the draft on his yacht, and everyone kind of said, oh, that's why the Cowboys had a pretty decent draft, is because Jerry wasn't there to meddle and get in somebody's ears or change their mind for them. So it'll be very interesting to see how much impact Jerry has on this year's draft. Talking to James Allen of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Coming up in the next segment, you're listening to the Chris Duel Show on Ticket 716 AM 1300 The Zone.
Hall of Fame stuff are you asking, James? Are we just doing mostly football and draft with him?
What's up? Sorry, I missed that.
What are we besides? Are we just talking the draft and what teams may do and who's going to go where with James? Is that the plan?
Yeah, mostly for Cowboys, and then I'd have like a fun little Pro Football Hall of Fame posted on their Twitter the other day. He's really knowledgeable about the busts and all those kind of things, and they posted just a fun question of how many people in the Hall of Fame have classes on their busts, and was going to get into his favorite busts. And then he's an Aggie,
yeah.
And their spring game is this weekend. So I was going to get into that as well. The jersey change thing, I think, too. And I think that also has implications for the Hall of Fame, right? And the way we treat people in the Hall of Fame. And the rings of honor and things like that. Because at some point, you can only retire so many jersey numbers.
Right.
That's my take on it anyway, because it would be weird if you got rid of like numbers 1 through 12 and then I don't know. And then like the Kyle Pitts thing we just talked about will be a big one. But yeah, Pro Football Hall of Fame, NFL rule changes, that kind of stuff.
All right. Will we have him the whole segment?
What's up?
Will we have him the whole segment?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see that post from John about Emery Ballard?
Mm-hmm.
He actually died on February. Wait a minute. According to this, he didn't die last week. Let's see when died in February of 2011.
Yeah, James. Hour number 3, 8 o'clock hour on the Duel show. My name is Shannon Salty Sweeney. Chris Duel taking a rest as he is gearing back up to be his normal, happy, and hyper self following his second COVID shot. It had him feeling a little down and out yesterday. After he received it in the afternoon, by the evening, he was not feeling too hot. So joining me this morning is the lovely and talented and beautiful, may I say, Mr. Andy Everett. Joining me from his
Thank you.
office in San Antonio. And joining us now, as he does on Fridays, Mr. James Allen of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. James, I'm surprised we didn't get any intro music from you today. Yeah, both Andy and I are going to get our second vaccinations in the coming weeks. So I'm not super excited about it as I thought I would be, but I guess it's something to do. So I will take it. Not looking forward to the aftermath and hope that should I experience any of the symptoms that either Sam or Chris have had, that it is short lived. Now, our question today that we're asking our audience, James, is which Texas athletic sporting event are you most looking forward to? Because Texas volleyball is now playing in the NCAA national championship game against Kentucky on Saturday. Baseball's got a 14 win streak. They're going to try and keep going over Oklahoma State. And the orange and white spring game, of course, is tomorrow at 1 p.m. But Texas A&M, your tribe, plays at 1 o'clock as well for their spring game. So which game are you going to be watching? See, I've got a wedding to go to tomorrow too, so I'm able to watch the first half of the Texas orange and white game on TV, but then I'm going to be at the wedding with my phone under a table, flipping between Austin FC and that Texas volleyball game. Go ahead, Andy.
James, you mentioned we mentioned that both the Aggies and the Longhorns are with the landscape of college football. Aggies and Longhorns aren't supposed to like one another. And I went to Oklahoma, and Longhorns and Sooners aren't supposed to like one another. I'm just wondering where you weigh in on how those rivalries have changed, especially that since Texas and A&M don't play each other anymore. And from my perspective, I was kind of taught from a very early age that you wanted Texas to lose every game they played because they were in the Southwest Conference and OU was in the Big Eight. And I think that's changed now because for those teams to be relevant, they've got to beat somebody that's good, and it needs to be a named school and a traditional school that's good, so they get higher ranking points. Needs Texas to be good, and Texas needs for OU to be good. Where does an Aggie weigh in on this as to what do you want to see from Texas? And obviously, don't play them, but the rivalries that you now have, you need those teams to win when you're not playing them.
keeping with not liking the Patriots, because I've kind of created a one-sided rivalry between myself and Tom Brady. He kind of got on my good side after that Super Bowl win, right? He let loose on the boat. He's throwing the trophy around. He's having his avocado tequila. He's stumbling to the car. He's having a great time. He's joking with people on Twitter. But the NFL released their rule change over this week of the jersey numbers, and certain players can now wear different numbers. And Tom Brady is not happy. He's like, why even have numbers? Let's just have colors. It doesn't make any sense. It's going to be harder to read defenses, and you're going to get things confused. I don't really get it too much from his perspective, because, well, they're still, the colors are still there. Why should the numbers matter all too much? I think he'll get used to it. But of course, he is old man at this point, who's been in the league a long time and probably just isn't up for change at this point in his career. But what are your thoughts on Tom Brady being the Karen of the NFL this week with this recent rule change, and your thoughts on the rule change at all?
James, tell me why it's important for the quarterback to identify who the mic is. I don't think a lot of people have always wondered that.
We are officially counting down the days until the draft. And of course, Cowboys at that number 10 spot, James. They're always one to watch, because in years past, they've been known to fumble with the draft. And that's not just with their first picks, but with every pick that seems to follow for them. Most people hoping that they go defense this year. However, a video surfaced yesterday of Mr. Jerry Jones crashing an interview with Kyle Pitts. What are your thoughts on, like, the Cowboys taking Pitts if he happens to still be there at 10, and Jerry kind of putting himself in a situation where maybe he shouldn't have been in, which was crashing this interview?
What with 10 picks in the draft, if the Cowboys don't trade some of those picks to move up or move around however they do, I think they should be able to at least get 6 or 7 players, 3 or 4 on offense, 3 or 4 on defense, that can kind of patch things if they get so intrigued with Kyle Pitts because he's this one-in-a-lifetime tight end and have to give up some of those picks to get up to 4 or 5 or 6 to draft him. Now they're going to have fewer opportunities for that. And while I think getting Kyle Pitts would be another weapon on the offensive line, and they probably need at least 3 or 4 impact players on defense, don't they? Three.
James, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the show that the Rams have a draft house in Malibu, a 9,000 square foot mansion that they're using as their home base war room during this draft. We saw, obviously, with the pandemic, a lot of coaches drafting from their homes last year. But as we kind of move away from this pandemic and things go back to quote unquote normal, is this something that the NFL could maybe look to do as far as, helping with branding and income? Because this draft house is being sponsored. They are getting paid for this. And it kind of, I think, adds to the pageantry and the interest of, the NFL draft, because it's just something different than seeing just a bunch of old dudes sitting in a random office room with a bunch of phones around them. I mean, who knows what we'll see inside this 9,000 square foot mansion, especially during the first round where they don't even have a draft pick to worry about. They're just going to be chilling and watching. Do you foresee maybe something like this with happening with other teams as years go on to try and liven up the draft even more?
Yeah, I love the analogy you make about billionaires playing poker. A lot of people play fantasy football, and this is basically fantasy football for real, with managers in every sport, and then the owners who get involved in sometimes like Jerry does as the GM with the money they've made. I guess it's his money and he can do whatever he wants with it, but he rolled the dice a lot, making millions in the oil field, and now he's doing it with the pro football team. Mm-hmm. I do too.
James Allen of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. James, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll certainly do this again next Friday where we can recap the first round of the draft and then start getting into round two. How's that sound? Oh, thank you, Jane. And shout out to the Allen family. We will be right back on the Chris Duel Show on AM 1300 The Zone and Ticket 760, recapping the weekend in sports and looking ahead.
Okay.
Ah, this feels like a good rainy day song just to hang out to. Some Coldplay here on this Friday on the Chris Duel show. Sam Freeze running the board, doing a ton of production work on the back end. That doesn't get talked about enough. The production work that's done behind the scenes. I know. But it's Sam doesn't just pick out great music. He does a lot of work behind the scenes that goes unnoticed. So thank you very much, sir. We appreciate you being here today and yesterday. And Mr. Andy Everett joining me on short notice because Chris Duel, unfortunately, is suffering some side effects of that second round COVID shot, as many people have reported. I think we all, in one way, hope that we don't get it because, you don't, no one really likes to feel bad unless you're that one kid who always seemed to be in one of my classes growing up in school who's like, oh, I was sick again. And I was like, what do you mean you were sick again? Why are you excited about that? Well, I played video games the whole time. What do you mean you played video games the whole time? I'm close to tears when I'm sick. I hate being sick. I hate being stuck at home, and just feeling like death or near death. So I hope Chris is feeling better this morning. As Andy and I mentioned, we are both coming up on our second shots here, so I'm hoping for the best for both of us. But they're saying that if you do feel bad, it's because you have such a great immune system that it's such a shock to get that second dose. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll feel one type of way if I don't feel anything or if I'll be like, hey, I'm pretty healthy if I do end up feeling bad. But we've had a lot of fun here today talking about that jersey number rule change and Tom Brady. Just, I guess he just needed something to complain about, right? He's won his Super Bowl. He went and had his knee surgery. He can't go out and practice right now, so he's got to do something. So I guess I'll take to social media to talk about the rule change. I mean, he's 43. He's been in the NFL a long time. I can understand why he doesn't want change to come, but that's just part of playing in the league today. Changes are a coming and they will be coming as plenty of players announce their excitement and that they will be changing their numbers. We've also talked about our high five play of the day. Mr. Tim Tebow giving an incredible shout out to a 105-year-old woman, Cora Bell Edison, who, like Andy noted, she's from Mississippi, but loves her some Tim Tebow, who of course played for Florida in college, where he won the Heisman, he won a national championship. He is the man, and so great for him to do that for her because I'm sure he gets flooded every day with video requests. Also talking a lot of Texas as Texas volleyball beat Wisconsin, who previously was undefeated going into that matchup, but they swept them in the final four game last night. Texas now heading to the championship game against Kentucky. Will you make time to watch that this weekend? I believe it's a night game, Andy.
The
It's not high on
the
your radar.
No, but I think anytime that you get to a championship match of any kind, the that takes precedence over everything else within the university. I'm sure the athletic staff will be very focused on that, and the Texas community will be. And but I think the world revolves around football, basketball, and a little bit with baseball. And obviously, if this were a national championship in football, I think everybody would be watching. But the volleyball scene will be a little bit different. But congrats to them for getting this far. It's anytime you're playing for a championship, that's always huge.
Well, our poll voters over at Ticket and AM 1300 The Zone's Twitter pages are voting that they are most excited for that championship. Like I've mentioned, I'll be at a wedding, so I don't know if I'll get to watch it. I'll do my best. But now I'm also thinking back to the other times I've watched them make these championship runs in whatever round, and they always seem to lose when I'm watching. So I don't know. Maybe it's best for Texas and myself if I just don't tune into that one. Also taking place this weekend, that orange and white game. I know I'm amped for it. I'm amped to see Sark live in action. I'm antsy to see these players in action. I didn't get to attend any games last year because we decided to forego our season tickets because of COVID. I just really didn't want to wear a mask. The shots weren't out yet. I just didn't know if these things were going to be super spreaders. So I just thought it best for myself and my family not to attend. I wish I was able to go to DKR tomorrow to check it out, but I won't. I'll be watching it on TV. Andy, you are really excited to see Sark really start his era officially tomorrow, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think it's important for listen, the first game they play is not going to be a pushover with Louisiana. But if they don't, there's going to be a lot of Longhorn fans that are going to go, okay, what do we get into ourselves into now? And are we on the same bandwagon when Tom Herman lost to Maryland and all of those kind of things? So I think it's going to take a year or two for Texas to get the Sark footprint. His signature on the team program is that the players and maybe even some of the staff had this sense of entitlement that they're just supposed to win because they're wearing the burnt orange and they're have the Longhorn symbol on their helmet and they go out there and play. And that's one of the things that Tom Herman could not fix. And hopefully it's something that Steve Sarkisian can fix, because if you just think you're going to win because of your pedigree, chances are that you're not. Seniors from last year, and they have a little bit of retooling to do. They were a top 20 program last year, and they won't be a pushover. So, and then Texas also, I believe, plays Rice, and then they have a Power 5 game scheduled in there somewhere along the way as well, because the Big 12 makes all of its teams play each year in non-conference, which I think is good. But then it also, the SEC doesn't have that rule, and the SEC is all about getting home games. I've had this conversation before that when you're at Texas and Oklahoma and Alabama and Auburn, and in a normal year you can put 100,000 plus people in your stadium, you want home games. The economic impact, I read this recently, the economic impact for a football game in College Station is 100 million. Impact is upwards of 300 million. So you're putting that much money into the economy with hotel rooms and restaurants and tailgating and people buying stuff and all those kind of things. So these big time college football programs, it's nothing for them to pay. I'm sure Louisiana is getting close to $1 million, if not more, to play at Texas on that first game. And they're not necessarily going in there just to take their money and get.
I've always found that interesting, though, that there are teams that will take money and gladly get beat by you. It's almost like it's a practice game just for their conference games to come later on. But if you're going to do that, you might as well play the best competition and get paid.
Well, it's also kind of cool for Louisiana to play in front of, like, we don't know what the number is going to be come September 4th. Mm-hmm. But let's say it's back to normal for a school like Louisiana that typically plays in front of 25,000. Mm-hmm. Intimidated by that and some relish in it, and the more the merrier. So it's just an opportunity to be in an atmosphere for those schools. The biggest thing from a Louisiana perspective is they don't want to get anybody hurt because they still have the Sun Belt games to play. The UTSA will do that. UTSA is going to play at Illinois to begin the season. Starting next year in 2022, they'll play every other. They're getting $8.5 million for 5 games at Texas, but they also hope to win one of them, and they're not going to go in there and just lay down. But just to play in that atmosphere is something that's kind of unique.
You mentioned that atmosphere. Right now, the thought is Texas and DKR will be at 100% capacity come the fall. I believe that's.
But will people go?
What's up?
Will people go? Mm-hmm. For the Rangers, they're saying, okay, we're not going to limit capacity. We'll fill up every seat. As a fan, are you still going to go to a Texas game if it's 100% or 80% or whatever the number is? Or are you still kind of cautious that I'm not sure I want to go unless there's more people vaccinated? What's what's going to be the test for people to have the confidence to go back to arenas?
I will go, and that's just me speaking for myself. I mean, I'll be fully vaccinated, and I also, as I mentioned, didn't go last year, and that was hard and weird to watch them play in DKR on a TV that I'm not, somewhere in the stadium at least watching it from. So I will go. I will feel safe. Even if the masking is still in place, I will go this year. Um, and I would think a majority. It would be so weird for them to open this new end zone, have Sark, all the hype around it, and for it to still be empty and be empty not because there's restrictions on numbers, but people feel, either not safe or the students are lackluster. That's been an issue in recent years. Okay, is it the location that the students are sitting in that's the issue? Is it how we're getting students in? Is that the issue? Is it, are the games scheduled at a weird time? Are we making it too difficult with these wristbands for students to even get into the stadium, or is it just the students not interested because of where the team is or the perception of the team? So I would hope, all things included, that whatever the percentage is, that it is at that capacity for all of the home games this year. I know Chris Del Conte has mentioned on Twitter that they've got some surprises up their sleeves as far as what the new South end zone might be able to do as the team runs out of the tunnel. New jumbotron as well. It's looking so beautiful. For anyone who hasn't seen it, they do have a live camera up on Texas's website just so you can watch the construction. I mean, looking at where it was and to where it's going to be, I am super excited just to see that alone.
Yeah, I think that's something that everybody's excited about. And if we can get, I think that I saw the report earlier this week where 100 million people have had at least one shot. One, some obviously have had two. But if we get to a level of vaccination to where people feel comfortable and people that don't feel well stay home, I think that'll be the green light for people to come back out and enjoy the sporting events and the tailgating and all the pageantry that goes with college football. Did you see also the second overtime now? You can't wait till the third. So they're trying to get the games over quicker.
I love that they're trying to get the games over with, but they've just, with all these rule changes, it seems year in and year out in both the NFL and college football for overtime, it's hard to keep up. That I'm just going to take them in as they come and hope that, Texas got into so many overtime games last year that some they pulled away from, some like that OU game, not so much. So I'm just hoping that whatever it is, Texas doesn't find themselves in too many situations like they did
Well,
last year.
the powers that be in sports are trying to shorten the games, and the games are going to be the length they are based on the strategy and the game. Baseball, you can try to hit a home run on every pitch more than it is anything else, and plus we change all kinds of pitchers. But I don't understand why you don't want to see more football. I'm not, from a television standpoint, they're trying to get the game over with so they can get to the next game.
Right.
But from a fan standpoint, if you go to the game and it's 3 hours and it's an overtime, why wouldn't you want to be there for another 30 or 40 minutes watching your team play?
I agree. I think it depends on the team and the stress level that I feel, and that Texas already gives me a certain jump in my heart rate based on those games, especially that OU game last year, as it was back and forth. And Texas baseball also got a big matchup this weekend against number 24 Oklahoma State up in Stillwater. They will try and extend their win streak. Track, tennis, softball, all playing as well. Spurs fans, you can check out the Spurs game tomorrow night against the Pelicans at 7 o'clock on WOAI, your Spurs radio network. They will try to extend their now one-win streak against the who did they play last night? They played Detroit at home. They got to win at home. They will be at New Orleans to take on Zion and his group. And Austin FC fans, Game number 2 of the inaugural season. They will be looking for their first win and their first goal when they are up in Colorado tomorrow night. So a pretty big sports weekend after a pretty quiet one last week. All something to look forward to, and all stuff we will go over with you on Monday when Chris Duel returns. Thank you again, Andy, for stepping in on short notice.
You got it.
Thank you, Sam, for running everything, making sure we are A, on the air, and B, just keeping with time, because that is very important in this radio world. Thanks for everyone for tuning in, whether you're on Ticket 760, AM 1300, The Zone. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. Enjoy the fantastic sports weekend and the weekend in general. We will see you all on Monday. Signing off, it's Shannon Salty Sweeney on The Chris Duel Show.